Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Podcast Strikes Back. My name is George, and you're listening to our review of Spider-Man Far From Home with the boys Connor.
What's up?
And Benny.
Hello.
Well, folks, we're here for the grand finale of the Infinity Saga, finishing up where Endgame left off Spider-Man Far From Home, the second Spider-Man entry in the MCU, the fifth time Tom Holland has played the character of Peter Parker. Here we are, guys. We've been talking about this a lot, plenty of trailers and whatnot. We're in the non-spoiler part of the review, and what we like to do here is give a little bit of context of where we are with Spider-Man and the franchise, and maybe in a little bit of Marvel as well. Benny, why don't you kick us off where you were feeling with Spider-Man?
I feel like you were like on the cusp of losing your voice. Like you were just trying to like,
oh my God, water!
right at the end, you're gonna be like the guy out of Indiana
I wanted
Jones.
to jump in and
I'm just trying to bring in some cinematicness.
So in general, I'm a massive Spider-Man fan. The Raimi movies were huge for me. The Garfield movies, not the Bill Murray ones, the Andrew Garfield movies.
Well, the antithesis of huge.
Were the worst for me. I hate that first one more than possibly any other superhero movie. And when this little guy finally was headed back to the MCU, I got to say I was pretty excited about that. And straight from Civil War, I have been feeling that they've just knocked it out of the park. Best casting of Peter Parker / Spider-Man in one ever. I've loved everything they've done with him. Homecoming, I was so impressed with at the very beginning. Maybe I've cooled a little on it now, but only in the sense that it's like still, one of the top MCU movies for me.
It's not as funny or great as the first time you saw it.
Yeah, whatever can be.
Yeah.
And coming up to this one, I don't know, is in such a weird position, I guess, because this is somehow the final movie in Phase 3. It's the epilogue to Endgame, the biggest movie ever made, sort of. And the trailers, nothing about them seemed amazing to me, honestly. It was just another Marvel movie on the way. So I guess, as often happens with me, like half the time with these Marvel movies, the excitement just really kicks in when I sit down in the cinema and the lights go down. I'm like, fuck, it's a Spider-Man movie. So at that point, I'm just like so hyped up. But yeah, otherwise, kind of an up and down journey.
Connor?
I'm very much in the same kind of lead up. Really loved the Spider-Man films. The trailers in particular, I can sum up with one phrase, which is trust issues. I just, watching these trailers, I was like, I don't trust any of what these trailers are telling me. It was weird. It was one of those things where, like, I don't think the trailers could have done anything to kind of convince me that this wasn't going to be good. I had this kind of weird faith that this movie was going to turn out well. So the trailers were of pretty little consequence to me. Like, I mean, when I thought about them too much, like, it just kind of seemed a bit weird. Like, Feige telling us that this is the real conclusion to Phase 3 after Endgame just felt very weird. Like, that didn't feel right. But apart from that, I was actually quite excited for this film going in.
Yeah, I can't tell you how crazy I felt 12 years old when my cousin took me to see the first Raimi Spider-Man. And this series and this character is just one of my absolute favorites. And it stumbled along the way, but, through the Andrew Garfield films, but I've always been there ready for and willing to. I just want these films to really succeed. And I loved Homecoming. I go back to that one every so often, and that's one of my favorites in the MCU. Totally agree with you, Ben. Tom Holland, that is just perfect casting. It was the trailers for this. What was weird about it, and piggybacking off what you said, Connor, was like, we've gone from this really massive story in Infinity War and Endgame, and we're finishing on this like little European jaunt in Far From Home, and it's kind of like, this feels like there's this sort of weird discrepancy here where we're finishing this 23 movie arc with, you know, a trip to Venice that didn't look like it had the same level of consequence and scale.
Felt like a side mission, didn't it?
Yeah, totally. So,
And then Feige's coming out saying, no, this movie will deal with the consequences of Endgame, which were massive, obviously.
Yeah.
Like earth-defining.
yeah, so the trailers, I was kind of like, oh, let's see how this lands, because I was not really, you know, I wasn't really that pumped for this, but just going on the pedigree of the character and what Marvel's been able to pump out, I was like, oh, it's going to be a good film.
Yeah, Connor, you brought up such a good point there, which I think we'll be coming back to a lot in this, which is the trailer. Just by the nature of the premise of this film, there's clearly so little they're able to reveal early on through the marketing. So I guess maybe that's why I wasn't too fazed by the fact that I didn't care too much for the advertising.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the non-spoiler part of the review. Is there anywhere you guys want to kick off? Because this is actually a film where I've written notes. I don't normally write notes for reviews, but I've had to really think about this film because there's a lot to examine.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that because someone asked me the other day when we go see films, do we kind of put on our reviewer cap? And I was like, I think we specifically don't. Because
it's kind of our brand.
I want to go into a film and enjoy it.
Our brand.
And, you know, be someone that, you know, I don't want to have to think about like, how am I going to review this or how am I going to like talk about this? Like, I very specifically, you know, someone's like, oh, do you take a notepad into the theater? I was like, oh, fuck no. Can you imagine anything that would
dark in there?
Yeah. Or even like your phone, like writing out, like
you would.
Can you imagine anything that would ruin your experience more than that?
That's why reviewers hate movies.
Yeah, exactly.
I get it.
No, but there is somewhere that I want to kind of start with this, which is this movie's dealing with, as you said, Ben, the consequences of Endgame, the kind of the contextualization.
That's my first bullet point here.
There you go.
How they dealt with the snap.
And I think that, again, without getting into spoilers, I think that they dealt with it really well. Like surprisingly well, without, you know, spending half the movie explaining things. I think they did in the first 10 minutes an absolutely amazing job of saying, this is the world that we live in. This is how it's changed. Now deal with it and let's go, let's move forward.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. I liked, like, in the build-up, it's like, are they going to touch upon it? Are they going to address it head on? And they address it head on in this. And they have a few little funny sequences where, you know, it's like, why are all the kids who are his mates, why did they all get snapped? And they address with that and they play with that. And I was like, well done. Like, congratulations. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I don't know if it was successful all the time, but I appreciated that.
Yeah, I would say in the context of the Spider-Man home franchise, brilliant job. In the tone that this franchise has, with the characters they have, the way that they deal with that fallout is hilarious and informative, and it just works really well in the story without being overbearing or anything. In the context of the greater MCU, I would say the fact that this is probably the only dealing with the consequences of Infinity War and Endgame that we're ever going to see, because this movie takes place 8 months after Endgame. That's like, I guess that's it. Fuck, all right. I'm not disappointed by it because that's not what I wanted this movie to be. I like what this movie did, but as just kind of having to look at the bigger picture and be like, oh, okay, all right.
We'll see. I think they might draw upon it more than you suspect.
Maybe with all this TV Disney Plus stuff, I would hope so.
They're rebuilding post the snap and whatnot.
Yeah, but the events of Endgame are so big. But again, that's kind of I do not want to lay any of that at this movie's feet because this really feels in a standalone in a lot of good ways.
And I thought it was quite surprising. Like I said, it was fairly short and succinct, but in that short and succinct area, they dealt with a lot of the things that people brought up around the snap. And I thought, I just really appreciated how they contextualized this world. So,
and like you said, just very quickly being like, this is it, move past it. And I think that worked so well in this film. And going in, looking at the trailers, everyone was like sneering, like, oh, so every character from Homecoming disappears and comes back 5 years later. And again, they address that head on as well. And it's great. Yeah. It's really good.
Fun.
And they deal with specifically stuff around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would also like to give a big shout out to Tom Holland and Peter Parker's story. I did think that the human element and what he's trying to do, like the more personal love story aspect here, like he just knows how to really convey it. And for me, it doesn't feel cheesy. I think a lot of other actors, it could be so forced. Like, can you imagine like a Hayden Christensen kind of actor in
Like
this role?
Like a Andrew Garfield.
like Andrew Garfield, and how mortal in that series was.
Exactly.
And
How
forced
creepy was he? And I like the earnestness, and I bought into his character and the awkwardness of being a teenager and, you know, falling in love and or liking somebody and having a crush on somebody. And I thought they did that well. And I think teenagers wouldn't be cringing. You know, some of these things, like, that's not how teenagers talk to each other. It's like, that's an adult writing for a child, for an adult audience. And I think this hit, I would imagine that teenagers would get something out of this. And I thought that is very successful. And it's really, compared to Homecoming and compared to any other MCU film, this is really trying to go for that market, I feel.
It definitely feels like the scale has been brought down, and I think that's really clever.
In a way, it has, but in a way, it hasn't. And I think we'll probably talk about more about that in spoilers.
They touch on big things, but the overall feeling of this film is very kind of personal. It's very much also like it's Spider-Man's movie. So Endgame,
Peter Parker's movie, even more so, I would say. This really is a school trip. I would say that is far and away the biggest part of this movie.
Yeah.
Really surprisingly for me, I was so shocked at how much time was dedicated in this film to Peter Parker and his life, and how the Spider-Man part of his life was directly kind of associated with that. Even.
Yeah. That was Yep.
That's
a good point. No, what I was going to say is like we've gone from Endgame, which is 1,000 characters with the scope of the entire universe, and we've immediately gone to one kid and his adventure in Europe, his school trip in Europe. And yeah, you're right, Ben. Like it's very much just that story with things happening around him, but that's the main crux of it, and I think that's really cool.
And I think the kids, or, you know, following on from Peter Parker, like all the kids, the ensemble, I liked where they went. I liked where they went with Ned's character. That was fun. Maybe the joke gassed out a little bit. That's up to your, your opinion. But Zendaya as well, I actually found her a little bit irritating in Homecoming as MJ. And this one, I really liked her in this. And also, you know, some of the other characters, I thought that they were fun and they did what they needed to do.
So John Watts did such a great job with Homecoming in having this extremely young ensemble. One of the few examples where we don't have these kids being played by, mid to late 20-somethings. And that paid off dividends. And I really think that works at least as well in this one. They are a little bit older, obviously. But
I think everyone other than the guy that plays Ned, because he fucking grew up. He looks like a 30-year-old man in this.
Yeah.
What is it? Jacob Batalon.
Doesn't help that he's bald, no offense.
Why would you say that?
Why
do you mention that? He's just like...
I was like,
what are you talking about?
Are you saying, oh my God? No, I just like the kind of the first thing he shows up, I'm like, oh, you are not a kid anymore.
And yeah, as you said, Georgie, Zendaya, I loved her in this movie as much as I love Tom Holland, both of them. And I feel like she had a really good role in this as well, where she was kind of a bit of a supporting character in the first one who worked for me, didn't work for you. But in this one, they really flesh her out much more than I feel they've ever successfully done with the Mary Jane character before.
Yeah, I agree.
I thought that I liked how they delved into her character. I think they like ramped up the awkwardness a little bit in this one.
I feel like they ramped it down.
Reverse
ramping, I like to call it.
Definitely.
No, she was so weird and awkward in that first one, man. I found it obnoxious.
The situation may have been, but she like always came across to me as like quietly confident in the first one.
Oh, just like one-liners in the first one I didn't like.
Yeah, no, I get exactly what you're saying, Connor. In the first one of the things that I really love that you never really see in these movies is when Peter asks Laura to the dance, she's as nervous as he is. like there's this little moment where she's really nervous as well, which is, you think, oh, the hot girl in school, he's going to ask her, but then they're both kids. None of them have any experience in this field. It's all weird. And what they do so well in this movie is we get a closer look at MJ, who in the first movie, I think definitely, and I'm like, this is a retcon essentially, but yeah, she comes across as this weird, super confident outsider, like funny one-liners. But in this one, with a closer look into her character. Yeah, no, I liked it as well, but I like that when you look deeper, she's as uncomfortable and awkward as every one of these kids as well. Yeah. So I just really love what they did with her character in this.
Yeah, totally. I think just capturing what it's like to be an awkward teenager, I think they did really well. Mysterio. This
Jake
was
Gyllenhaal.
a big thing with this very beloved character. Will they be able to bring him to the big screen? And I can say that I really liked a lot of what they did with Mysterio, but I do have some complaints. But I'd say 70-80% of it was really, really good.
Yeah. Jake Gyllenhaal in general is like such, when he puts on the charm, he is such a likable person. And can play a likable person like really convincingly.
Could also play like the most unlikable person.
Very easily. Yeah.
The
guy's got range.
Obviously, the very nature of the character, there's not too much we can talk about with him. But I would say that I was absolutely very happy with him as well. There's reveals along the way. I think I probably just liked him more and more as the movie went on.
I'd definitely say.
Yeah.
And they made the crux of what his superpower is. They made it work with what the MCU superpower, quote unquote, within what the MCU's sandbox is, which I appreciated. I think because that's a tough one to get right.
Yeah, Connor.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think he was really likable in this. And he kind of shows quite a bit of range. Obviously, we don't want to get too much into it. I mean, this is a hard movie to talk about without spoilers because, like we said, even in the trailer. Like there's things in the trailer, like the trailer seemed super cagey about what it did or did not want to show you. So this kind of felt like, I don't know what we're really going to talk about.
I got a few negatives
in general. Yeah. Go ahead.
Unless you go, Benny.
Well, I was just thinking just quickly, the first movie was such a like a Spider-Man, a new way to look at the character, which is Spider-Man with the mentor of Tony Stark kind of in it. This one kind of follows that formula a little bit with both Nick Fury and Mysterio in a kind of a mentor role for him. How do you guys feel about the integration of Nick Fury since we've already talked about Mysterio?
I did enjoy it, but there was something that felt a little bit awkward about it for some reason. I'm not quite sure.
I think this is the most useful or kind of important or like the best reason for Nick Fury to be around. In a very long time, I think, bar Captain Marvel, of which obviously he was like a main character. But apart from that, I think this is the most useful he's been in the MCU for quite a while.
It's the thing, it feels like they haven't really known what to do with him for so long because he like retired in Winter Soldier essentially, but then he just kind of hung around for a bit. We were never really sure why.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like I liked him in this. I didn't have any major complaints.
I like Sam Jackson a lot in this.
Yeah, me too. But I was just kind of like, I don't know. It just didn't feel very organic to me. But that's not a major problem.
He I think there was a lot of marketing material that showed this as well. But has he ever quite been that sweary in the MCU in general?
Was he more sweary in this one?
I felt like he was a little bit more aggressive in this one, which again I like, but it felt.
Well, he felt because he's always been kind of an intimidating character, but he feels more like in this movie you really are seeing him through the eyes of Peter Parker.
Yeah,
like he is even more like just kind of scary and distant.
Yeah,
which I definitely like the way he
because like when him and like Tony Stark face off, there's that kind of sense of equals, kind of looking at each other type thing. Whereas this one, this one you definitely get the sense that like it's Peter Parker is not prepared for this kind of interaction.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Your negatives, Georgie?
I felt like this movie was a bit long.
Okay.
I think clocking at 129 minutes, that I think it could have used a bit of a trim.
It's an odd complaint coming from you.
Yeah, I know.
Who would have seen this coming? So if you're someone that really hates long movies, it's a bit long.
No, I don't hate long movies. I love 2001: A Space Odyssey.
You hate movies that feel long.
I hate movies where it's non-justified.
I feel like
It's got to weave into the narrative, and this one was kind of like for me. Listen, I'm not. I would say this is a minor negative.
yeah. I'm just trying to think. I thought that this movie actually, considering how much ground it covered, I thought it covered it quite quickly. There aren't an awful lot of scenes.
I don't think it's a pacing issue. I don't think it's like there's any lulls or like maybe there's some lulls, but like there's no like it's more like this is actually a little too long for what it's trying to do, and it could have used
There's a lot
5 or 10 minutes missing.
There's a lot of padding in it. Like there's a lot of just little
like jokes,
funny bits and character bits,
Yeah.
which I like. So I didn't feel it was too long because I really it all felt quite organic to me in the kind of teen comedy that is.
See,
the
I'd
prevailing
agree with you.
genre in
Like I
this.
think that part of the charm of this movie is the fact that they took time to show those little moments, which I thought made this film, made it very distinct. Like if you think about Infinity War or Endgame, there are no excess bits in those films. Like those movies, you feel are cut to the bare minimum that they would have to be to tell that story. Whereas this one kind of takes its time in letting you have fun with these characters, which I really liked.
I mean, within the main sort of chunks of what this film deals with, there was just a lot of time dedicated towards the, some of the character moments and the teenage, the story, that component of the film. And I think it actually left some other parts lacking. And they should have moved a bit of time around or given more spotlight to certain other areas of the film because they ultimately felt a little unexplored to me.
I absolutely understand what you're saying. I think the difference lies in where my priorities were with this movie, which is definitely so much more invested in Peter Parker and his friends. Like my ideal version of this movie is probably just the actual trip with none of the superheroics in it. So none of that stuff weighed down on me. I can absolutely see how it would to someone else though.
And then just following on that, like the action in this, I feel like this is really lackluster action.
Okay.
And I don't think Homecoming really did have that great action either. But I don't, there was just something here where none of the action sequences really got me. However, there are some sequences in here that I really loved and some of the most creative stuff you've seen in the MCU.
There's definitely more action in this than there is in Homecoming. But Homecoming is very much this kind of, I don't know, it's a really toned down, kind of very, your friendly local neighborhood Spider-Man type thing. So there doesn't have to be that level of action. And I felt like the same kind of vibe with this. I wasn't expecting Civil War levels of action with this film. Although, like you said, there are sequences where you get more than enough. And I think that, to be honest, the end action sequence was probably about the most intense action that I've seen Spider-Man go through in any film. So
I think it's some of the best web slinging action we've ever seen. I think it's some of the best action we've seen in the MCU, specifically that sequence. I don't think the whole movie has the most amazing stuff throughout. And I do feel like these movies, both of them, are not using the character to his greatest potential. I think that the Raimi movies, especially Spider-Man 2, did some amazing stuff with that character. Again, I haven't watched it in a long time though, and maybe it's rose-colored glasses. But I really do think some of the stuff in this one was like spectacular.
I sometimes feel like there's points in this movie where I'm like, I'm kind of I don't really know what I want, but it's not what I'm seeing on screen. It's like I want the action to feel more impactful, but I actually want a smaller scale, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man kind of film. However, as I said, some of the sequences in this gets very, very creative, and I was very, very impressed.
I think I know what you're talking about. I think that if I were to take a guess at why that is, it's because the nature of the action that you get in this, it's really CGI. And it feels like CGI simply because there's absolutely no way that you'd be able to film that any other way. And I think that your brain kind of goes, it doesn't feel as
Glazes
solid.
over a bit.
Yeah, there's no guy in a suit, hitting. Like when you see a lot of the sequences where you see like Captain America and Iron Man fighting, that feels visceral. That feels like two guys hitting each other. because you're looking at Chris Evans like thrown around or actually throwing punches and stuff. Whereas this with the web slinging, I thought the sequences were really cool, but I do get what you're saying where you're like, I think your brain kind of says this is CGI and it doesn't feel as solid.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, and also I feel like, and I meant to touch on it before, like this film's trying to do like a sort of Peter Parker high school love story, a sort of post Iron Man, post Endgame thing, and then also Mysterio's arc. And I don't think it gave enough time and spread out the time and actually gave enough to all those things for them to dance and make this film really successful.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that they could have rearranged a few things, given a bit more. Because I'm actually surprised that this is 91% on Rotten Tomatoes.
You think
I'm
it should be less
surprised.
or more?
Yeah, I'm
Really?
surprised that everyone's loving it as much. And like, what the fuck am I talking about? Look at our Captain Marvel review. This is a better film, I would say, than I'd say I prefer this to Captain Marvel. But like 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, man, like. Well, we'll get into it in spoilers, but like
I find that really strange because I actually really like how they wove in those concepts together. I think that
I like them, but I just don't think they gave enough to each one for them to work. Like I wanted more, and I felt like things were skimmed over and things weren't allowed to actually be given the depth and make them feel like really integrated in the film.
It was perfectly balanced for me. I
Yeah.
cannot wait to discuss the specifics of that,
Yeah.
though.
Should we get into recommendations?
Jump into
Is there any other negatives?
Yeah, should we jump into spoilers?
Any other comments at all?
Not really. I mean, like overall, maybe we'll just jump into recommendations then. Overall, I really enjoyed this film, like quite a bit. There was I loved the pacing of this film. I didn't really ever feel bored by it. I thought that they were it just felt like a fun film to me. Like I felt the Endgame was kind of emotionally exhausting. Like that just had, yes, it had funny moments, but that just kind of took you through the full roller coaster. And I think that this one in general kind of maintained a more kind of happy and excited and kind of like low key feel in that sense, with the exception of at least one part which I think kind of hit me in the feels. But apart from that, like I came out of that film being like, when you've got that big grin on your face and you're like, oh, that was cool. I really enjoyed that. And that probably sums up how I feel about this film.
Yeah, I can't say I left the cinema with a massive grin on my face. Far From Home was like, I was kind of like, I really wanted just more. There's certain parts here that I feel so skimmed over. There is so many strong parts in this, though. I really do love Tom Holland in here. I love the kids in it. I loved how they dealt with the snap as well. So there's some really strong elements here, but there's something that feels a bit lopsided about this film, and I can't quite figure it out. We'll talk about it more in spoilers, but yeah, this is definitely like Homecoming is a far better Spider-Man film. Into the Spider-Verse is a better Spider-Man film. Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2 is a better Spider-Man film than this.
Wow.
So this is somewhere in the middle.
As long as you stop speaking there, then that's still a high bar. That's So shock horror. I've seen this movie twice now. I had to rush back in to watch it again because I had such a good time the first time. And there's just a lot in this movie to process, much more than I kind of expected going in. Yeah. And I got to say, this is the most, this is the most excited I've been about one of these since possibly Homecoming, the first one. I liked it more than that one, I think, overall.
Wow.
Maybe that's just because that one's dimmed a little over time, as these things do. And this one's all fresh and new and shiny. But I just thought the balance of character and narrative and continuity and callbacks and just fitting everything into the universe was all so perfect for me. And the story it was telling was interesting in ways that some of these movies, there's not many layers to them. There's not much going on. This one actually felt like it was trying to say something relevant, or I don't know what exactly it was saying, but it was engaging at least with something relevant.
There was an interesting theme explored and touched upon.
Yeah, exactly. So that was really cool. And then I feel like it gets better as it goes on, and it ends so strong, like all the way up to the end of the credits. That you just can't help like kind of walking out and being like, "Fuck yeah!" and being excited for the future of the MCU, which is, honestly not what Endgame did for me, because of course that felt like such a finale and it wrapped up so many things. But this one I come out of like, man, I want a new one of these Spider-Man movies every year.
Yeah.
More so than any franchise in the MCU. I'm like, Spider-Man. I'm so happy with what they're doing with him. I want them to keep doing it.
Yeah, man. This is one of the most, like in terms of post-credit scenes and what happens in them, like this is impact. Like post-credit scenes in the past few years have been, it's like something cool, or Howard the Duck turns up.
Yeah,
This one's actually like, whoa, actually that's more important than what happened.
More important than half the movies in the MCU.